Hello, sinners. I just wanted to drop in and tell you that My Horror Confessional is now part of the Ghoulish Podcast Network. In addition to producing podcasts, Ghoulish is also a publisher. Ghoulish Books has published dozens of horror books that have gone on to receive award recognition and even film adaptation treatments. Browse their spooky offerings over at ghoulish.rip and use discount code CONFESSIONAL for 10% off your order. And remember, ghouls, live spooky, die spooky. Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Myers. Welcome to My Horror Confessional, where every week I'll have a guest come on and talk about one classic horror movie that they haven't seen and why. We'll discuss the movie, the actors, and probably get off topic quite a bit. Once I believe that they have properly atoned, I will absolve them of their horror movie sin. Today in the confessional, we have Emily Ruth Verona. Emily received her Bachelor of Arts in Creative Writing and Cinema Studies from the State University of New York at Purchase. In 2014, she won the Pinch Literary Award in Fiction. She's a Bram Stoker Award nominee, a Jane Austen Short Story Award finalist, and a Luke Bitmead Bursary finalist. Previous publication credits include fiction and poetry, featured in several anthologies, as well as magazines such as The Pinch, Mystery Tribune, The Gasling, and Nightmare Magazine. Her essays or articles have appeared online for Tor, BookBub.
I think it's Litro. I've
Litro?
never had to
Okay.
say it out loud. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me start that over again. Um, Her essays and articles have appeared online for Tor, BookBub, Litro, Bust, and Bloody Women. Her novel, Midnight on Beacon Street, will be published by Harper Perennial in 2024. She lives in New Jersey with a very small dog. Emily, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, of course. So happy to have you on. So I think you left out the most crucial bit of information in that bio, which is the very small dog's name.
Her name is Phoebe.
Phoebe?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, she may or may not start barking at a snowplow as we do this because she's usually quietest when she's with me. She'd
O-
be pawing at the door if she wasn't in here. So
Okay, that's cool. No, I love it. And what kind of dog is Phoebe?
she's a Cavalier King Charles Poodle mix.
Whoa. I got the
Yeah.
poodle mix. I don't know the Cavalier.
They're kind of like Cocker Spaniels
Okay,
a little
okay,
bit.
good. Yeah. She's 50-50 and 100% all good puppy, right?
Yeah, she's an absolute sweetheart. She loves attention and snacks.
Well, I brought you on the show just to talk about Phoebe. So if that's cool with you, we got another 2 hours to go.
She has a very strong following online from people who follow me on social media, so I think they'd appreciate
Really?
that.
That's cool. Well, let's talk a bit about your background here. So first of all, you have a your book coming out in 2024, Midnight on Beacon Street. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that actually comes out the end of this month, so I will have to
Congratulations.
update my bio soon, I guess. It's a horror thriller mystery kind of. It's set on one night in 1993, and starts with a little boy standing in a pool of blood, and goes back and forth throughout the night between his point of view and the babysitter's point of view, leading up to that midnight with the blood in the kitchen. Um, and my main character, Amy, the babysitter, is a huge horror fan and talks about horror movies throughout the book.
Wow, that's really cool. That really sounds interesting. I can't wait to read that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So is this your debut novel?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like you've been writing for a while.
Yeah.
And have you always been writing in the horror genre
Um, not,
or
not,
horror thriller sort of?
not, not. Well, I started writing one. I was about seven. And
Very
I
cool.
started in historical fiction and fantasy because at the time I was reading a lot of historical fiction and fantasy. And then I kind of got into writing like family drama and mystery thrillers kind of in my teens, 20s. And then I got into writing horror in my mid 20s, but I've always loved horror. And especially I got into horror movies before I got into horror books, but I've always loved horror.
Very cool. If you like family drama, do I got a movie for you? And we'll talk about it in a second here. So you said that you got into horror movies before you got into horror books. So let's kind of start there. What I ask all my guests is like, what's your history with horror? Have you always liked it? Have you always loved it? Did you find it later in life? And then also, what was the family structure around it? Like, did your parents encourage your like of horror, your love of horror, or were they discouraging of it? So let's start there.
Well, I'm the youngest of three, and my brother and sister are both significantly older than me. They were 14 and 12 when I was born.
Okay.
And my brother has always loved horror, um, horror and death metal. So that was kind of the soundtrack of my childhood. Um, so he was always recommending horror movies to me. I remember I think my earliest like horror adjacent memory is probably him sitting me down with like some Wendy's chicken nuggets and like watching Spawn. And
Nice.
because our video store only for some reason ever had the unrated versions of movies. I'm pretty sure it was the unrated version. um
I
but
can't even imagine what the unrated version of Spawn looks like. It's just more of like Violator, just being Violator.
I have no idea. I just remember like being handed like the fast food, like, like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do for the next like hour and a half. And I just like ate chicken nuggets and watched.
That's awesome. That's cool.
But I in watching horror like myself, I got into it through Are You Afraid of the Dark? Um
Oh, I love that show so much. Yeah.
yeah, I
That was
I
my
was
childhood right there. Snick.
yeah, I was super, super into it as a child. I used to watch it all the time, and I loved that it was like the last thing on Nickelodeon, like that, and all that were the last things on Nickelodeon before Nick at Night came on. And
Yeah.
so I felt so old staying up for uh for Are You Afraid of the Dark and then scaring the shit out of myself.
Yeah. I would get ready for like Snick like it was like I was going out to a club. Like I would get
Mm,
dressed. I'd go excuse me, I would go to the local convenience store where my brother worked at, and like, as you could, I've been a fat kid my whole life, so I would like, get all the snacks and everything, and go home and get both me and my brother would go and get ready. Well, so my oldest brother worked there, but me and my middle brother were just 2 years apart. So my
mm,
oldest brother was about 10 years older than me, so we're kind of
yeah,
similar there. So
yeah.
that's how I got into it as well. But yeah, I'd get ready for Snick, and oh man, I loved it. Are You Afraid of the Dark was like pivotal childhood memories for me.
It definitely was like a core, like a cornerstone of shaping me as a child. I remember there's the episode with where they're making soup out of people's fears,
Yes.
and Nev Campbell, I believe, is in that episode. And I remember being absolutely terrified because I thought like the kid's dead uncle was like a vampire, and I was really scared of vampires. And my brother had told me he was a vampire when I was a child, so it completely freaked me out. And then I watched it as an adult, and I was like, huh, there are scarier episodes than this.
Yeah. I'm always wary of like going back and like rewatching shit from the childhood because it's like it's probably not gonna hold up, but
That's
some
how
of
me.
it
Oh,
is
that's how
is interesting.
me and my best friend in college. That's how we bonded and became friends. Was we would like get Chinese food and watch old Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes.
That's cool.
So that's like a thing we do. So some of them hold up incredibly well. The uh Laughing in the Dark holds up really well. Um,
Okay. I
with
don't
the
remember that
clown.
one.
It's the one with the clown nose.
Okay. Yeah. So I wonder if they're streaming anywhere because I would kind of love to go back and watch those.
Um, some of them are on YouTube.
Hmm.
Uh, and then I think the rest are like on bleh, Google Video, you can like rent them or
Oh,
something.
read them. Okay, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So,
But
so you got into horror movies kind of early on with your brother and stuff like that,
mhm.
but you didn't get into horror literature, it sounds like, until a little bit later.
Yeah.
What was it that got you into horror literature?
I think it was probably just loving horror movies and also loving urban legends. One of the first kind of like spookier things I remember writing was me and my cousin who, excuse me, she lived in Florida and I lived in New Jersey, and whenever we'd see each other, we'd like get together and like write this book together about Bloody Mary. And so we used to like mail pages to each other and stuff.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
and I've always been like really fascinated with ghost stories, and I was always trying to find local ghost stories, and I felt like I never had any good local ghost stories. Um,
Were you born and raised in New Jersey, or did you have any?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Was it just the New Jersey Devil?
Yeah, it's a lot of that, and I think just mainly like I grew up in a small town, and there just weren't a lot of ghost stories in just that particular area,
Hmm.
and so I was always like looking for more. So I'd like sit on the internet and like read ghost stories from like all across the state and then all across the nation. And then I think I probably transitioned from like reading ghost stories online to reading like spooky books.
Okay. Was there any one in particular you remember that stands out as like a favorite of your early Emily?
There's this book I'm haunted by because I haven't been able to find it and I don't know what it's called. I can just vaguely picture the book in my mind, and it's something about like a witch in a house on like a hill, and I think there's like like these kids kind of like looking up. I don't know. It's this book that I had as a kid that I've Googled like incessantly throughout the years and haven't been able to find. I think the first because I used to read a lot of those books that come out around Halloween, the like ghost stories across the United States
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
books. So I'd read those, but I think the first horror fiction I can really remember reading is probably Sleepy Hollow, or the story of Ichabod Bob Crane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I forget what the short story is called, but that because I also remember seeing that movie pretty young.
Okay, but I just got to go back and say that The Witch in the House on the Hill is a great title. Is a great title to a book.
It is, but it is not this book's title because I've Googled it and I can't find anything that looks like it.
Yeah.
I feel like we all have that though. We all have that one book that we're certain we made up as a child because we can't find it as an adult.
It's like kind of the opposite of like no, an earworm is a song you can't get out of your head. But this is like a book that you can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that driving somebody mad,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, let's before we start getting to talk about the movie, let's
Mhm.
talk about your book and how do people support you? How do they follow you? How is your book able to be pre-ordered? That sort of thing.
It is able to be pre-ordered, I believe, wherever books are sold. It's coming out, like I said, January 30th from Harper Perennial. It is, I am on social, kind of like all the social medias now. I feel like there are like 800 of them, and you have to
It's
like
too
cross post
much.
on all of them, and it's a lot. But I'm definitely on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky, and I'm Emily R. Verona on all of them.
At least you made it quick and easy for yourself because
Yeah,
yeah, that's just too much, man. Like I do Instagram and I've kind of stopped doing Twitter. I've kind of stopped updating there just because whatever. But yeah, I think I'm only doing Instagram right now. And like I'm having people tell me to do Blue Sky, and I think I have a Blue Sky account, but I just can't do it. It's too
yeah,
much. It drains
it's
you. It's draining.
yeah. Yeah, and like because I'll go through and I'll post something on Instagram, and like the first time it's fun, but then I post it on Twitter and Threads and Blue Sky, and by the end I'm like I kind of hate myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Have you ever watched did you ever watch The Office?
Yes.
Do you know Woof? Woof is a later thing that Ryan made up. It was a social media
Yes, I do
thing
remember that.
that updated all your other social medias. So
Yes.
like the one app above them all. I kind of want Woof. There's got
It
to be something
sounded
like that.
ridiculous at the time.
Yeah, because at that time there was only like Twitter and Facebook. That's it. Maybe
Yeah,
Instagram or something like that. But all right. All right. So Emily's here to confess her sin of never having watched The Phantom Carriage from 1921. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay. And so this is the part where I say shame, shame. No, I was kidding. Um, my confession is I had also never seen this movie. So I was so excited when you chose it because it's been on my list for a while. So my next question to you is why do you think this particular movie passed you by? Is it just a movie you hadn't heard of, or was it on your list and you just never got to it? That sort of thing.
I'm actually surprised. I had both, it wasn't on my list, and I had never heard of it before. Because I double majored in cinema studies in college, and we watched a lot of
Shame,
weird
shame, shame.
movies, like a lot of weird movies. Our majors exam to even be accepted like into the major was like 50 movies that we had to watch from like all over the world. And they were all like really, and a lot of them were very strange and like long and comprehensive. And I'm actually very surprised that we never talked about this one, or if I read about it, then I don't remember reading about it.
That sounds amazing though, that having to watch 50 movies or any, you know what? I would like to talk to you a little bit about that, the 50 movies you watched in
Yeah.
The Sunday school sessions, which is the Patreon exclusive show that we do. So
Mhm.
if you get for the audience, if you guys want to support the show, patreon.com/, my horror confessional. Every week I have the guest from that week and we have a separate conversation about that. So I'd love to talk to you about that. So let me make that note there. So all right, so this one was just one you hadn't heard of. For me, I think I had heard of it. It was like a couple years ago, probably a decade. Everything is like a decade now. I'm old. I was like looking at one of those lists of like 1,001 movies you need to watch before you die, and
Mm,
this was on there, and I was like, holy shit, this sounds great. And I have an affinity for silent movies.
mm,
Really love them a lot. Some of my favorite movies, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, obviously Nosferatu, but even outside of the horror genre, like a lot of Charlie Chaplin shit
mm.
or stuff like that. I just love it. How do you feel about silent films?
I really like silent films. You said Charlie Chaplin. I like City Lights. I like
City
City
Lights.
Lights a lot. And I really like Frances Marion was the highest paid female screenwriter for many years in Hollywood. And
Oh,
she
okay.
got Oscars for The Champ, which was a boxing movie. And oh, what's the other one? Um, it's a prison movie. But I believe they were both silent and they were both really, really good. And I remember enjoying those a lot. And
That's cool.
and
That's a good connection. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was
oh,
just saying that's a good connection to this movie in that this is based off of the novel written by a woman.
it
That's
is. Yeah. Yeah. I was reading the Wikipedia after I watched it.
yeah. So I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were gonna say?
Um, no, I was just gonna say, I want to see more Theda Bara movies, but it's hard to find some of them. But I
Yeah,
love her.
that's the thing. Like we don't realize how lucky we are to still be able to see some of these movies. This movie is 103 years old, and
It is.
it's
Yeah.
some of the movies that I've seen are like even older than that. And it like
Yeah.
the fact that we're still able to see it like digitally and stuff like that,
Mm,
it's amazing. Some of the work the I saw it on YouTube and it was a restoration by like it had been made in like the 70s and they made a restoration off of that. It was a 4K digital like scan. I was
mm,
like, Jesus Christ. And from by Criterion and the Criterion collection. So
mm.
that was pretty cool. But yeah, so I hadn't seen it and I saw it for this and I absolutely loved it. Like spoiler alert, this is a perfect movie for me. I loved it a lot. I'm so glad that we get a chance to talk about it. So let's talk about it a little bit here. So it was written and direct, and first of all, these are Swedish names,
They
and
are. Yeah.
I am going to butcher them, and I apologize, but I'm going to try my best.
I hadn't realized it was a Swedish film when we picked it because I didn't know anything about it. And when I went to watch it, I saw the names and I was like, oh, I have to say these on a podcast.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, like even like I did the Hour of the Wolf, which is not a silent film, but it is an Ingmar Bergman movie.
Mhm.
I always get Ingrid Bergman and Ingmar Bergman mixed up, but this is
Yeah.
Ingmar Bergman. So the Hour of the Wolf is an Ingmar Bergman movie from the 60s that's Swedish and black and white, but not silent. But he this movie was a major influence on Ingmar Bergman with have you seen The Seventh Seal?
I have not, no.
Okay, The Seventh Seal is are you familiar with what it's about?
A little bit.
Okay. So it's I haven't seen it either. This is my glaring mistake of movies I haven't seen. That's probably the number one, but
Mm.
it's from what I've seen and from what I've gotten from the zeitgeist and from reading about it. Um, Death visits a man and they have a chess match to see whether or not he's going to like the man uh bets death that he can beat him at a game of chess in order to save his life, that sort
Mm.
of thing. And Igmar Bergman got a lot of his ideas of death and what death looks like from this movie, The Phantom Carriage. It was his favorite movie. I think he was quoted as saying it's the best movie ever made, and he watched it
Mm.
at least once a year. So there's this movie like had so like what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Influenced tons of movies afterwards and is still influencing. I mean, there's a shot I will talk about when we get there, but there's a
Yeah.
shot here that's obviously a reference to The Shining.
Yes, I
Or
wrote that one down.
yeah, The Shining reference did, I should say. But yeah. So okay, so written and directed by Victor Sjöström. Sorry for the mispronunciation. He directed He Who Gets Slapped from 1924 with Lon Chaney, which is another amazing silent film. Lon Chaney as a clown, so fucking creepy, so good. And then it's based on the novel Carlin
Mm.
by Selma Lagerlof. So I want to talk real quick about Selma Lagerlof.
Mm.
So she was born in 1858 and passed away in 1940, but she was a Swedish writer. She published her first novel, Gosta Berling Saga, at the age of 33, and she was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature,
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
which she was awarded in 1909. And additionally, she was the first woman to be granted a membership in the Swedish Academy in 1914. So she was very accomplished. And this novel was very highly sought after to be translated into movie form. So the script took 8 days to finish. And in April 1920, the director, Sjostrom,
We could call him Victor.
yeah, say Victor. Victor traveled to Lagerlof's mansion to present it. And he ended up doing 2 hours of just reading the script aloud and performing the whole script by himself. And then she responded by offering him dinner, which Victor took as an approval to make the film. So it was really cool. But I love to see a woman in 1921, right?
Yeah,
1921, having the power and the say, like, yo, this is my movie. I mean, this is my book, I should say. If you're trying to adapt it, you have to get my approval. And like
yeah.
the man going to her house to get the approval to make this movie. And actually, I was talking earlier about Ingmar Bergman. He actually made a TV series. I believe it was a series, might have been a movie about the making of this movie.
Ooh.
So that's how important this movie was to him.
Oh. Yeah, I should have known that it was based on a book because a lot of silent films were based on books or short stories. But for some reason I hadn't thought of it. And then by the time I watched the movie, I was like, oh, I should read the book. And it was far too late to read the book. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll just have to think, watch the movie and be okay with the fact that I haven't read the book because I usually like to do both. But I was really interested by the author and her story. I thought she was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, she's had a bunch of her novels adapted into film, and some of her stuff was adapted as late as like 2017. So
Mm.
she's still getting her stuff adapted, which is really cool.
Mm.
Um, so real quick about the cast, I failed to mention that Victor also plays David Holm. which
He
is the
does.
main, kind of the main character of it, of the movie. And then his wife Anna is played by Hilda Borgstrom. Um, I call him Death George or George Death, was played by Tor Svenberg, and Sister Edith was played by Astrid Holm. Sister Maria was played by Lisa Lindholm, and then finally David's brother was played by Einar Axelsson. Um, and then so the special effects were mainly done with double exposures in the camera. Uh, Optical printing wasn't available until the 30s. So basically, several layers were used to enable like the ghostly images that we saw to
Yeah.
appear them to walk around like in sort of in three
Yeah, I read
dimensions.
that post production took much longer than production because they like in developing all of that.
Yeah, I mean they're creating this technology. Like it had been done a little bit before, but not to the extent that it was done here.
And they
And
do it so well. They
so
do it so well.
it still holds up. It's still
Hmm.
very effective. And yes, you kind of I was gonna go into this whole double exposure thing, like what it means. Then I was researching and I was like, I don't fucking know. I'm just gonna say double exposure. I'm not a scientist.
When
So
I saw it, my first assumption was double exposure.
yeah, yeah. And but some of the all and I should say all the double exposures, the effects in this movie look so much better and hold up so much better than like some CGI from the late 90s, early 2000s.
They do it. They really like I like watching it. I was one of the things I was so struck by was how well like all the technical aspects really hold up. And it just because even like in the beginning when it was just before they got to the double exposures, I was like I was just enjoying that they had like sets and like everything that was there was really there. And you make practical, sets and effects and everything. And then when they started doing the double exposures for Death in the Carriage, I was like, wow, this looks incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it looked great. It looked amazing. So starting the movie now. So it starts with some like peppy but also sad like orchestral music,
Mm-hmm.
which is over the credits, which I'm always a fan of. And then I kind of love silent films and even movies up until like the 60s where all the credits were at the beginning. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you know that the movie goes right up to the end of the running time.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I'm watching a movie like after the 60s and 70s, when there's always like, well, even a Marvel movie, you got to build in 10 minutes for credits, right? Like a Marvel movie, a big
Yeah.
CGI movie, but a normal movie is like 5 minutes of credits. So
Mm-hmm.
you can always work backwards. You're like, okay, 5 minutes of credits. We need to start winding down around here. I'm one of those people who like always, if I'm at home, I'm checking the time to see what act we're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of a movie. So this kind of throws me for a loop because you never know. Like
Yeah.
older movies will just fucking end. They don't care about wrapping shit up, you know.
Yeah.
So then we see there's these two Salvation Army sisters that is should I've already forgotten their names.
Maria and Edith.
Maria and Edith. Thank you very much. So Maria and Edith, and we see that Edith is basically at death's door. As the movie opens, she's described as dying from galloping consumption,
Mm,
which is an obsolete term for a really aggressive and rapidly progressing case of tuberculosis,
mm,
which is nearly always fatal. And what's messed up about this is that we find out how she got this tuberculosis later on in the movie.
yeah.
And what I really enjoyed about, like, what did you think about the nonlinear storytelling?
I love nonlinear storytelling. My book is told
Oh,
nonlinearly,
nice.
so I'm a huge fan of it. Um, I think like Memento is the coolest thing ever. Like I love when stories are told out of order, and I really loved the use of flashbacks to kind of like tell the different segments. And I like that it was different flashbacks. It wasn't like the beginning and then one continuous flashback was the entire movie and then the end. It was flashbacks like peppered in throughout the story.
It was the beginning, flashback within a flashback, back to beginning, flashback, and then like back to beginning. It was just like all over the place, which
Yeah.
if not handled well, could be really messy and really confusing.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think it was handled excellently.
Yeah, and that was like a fairly new thing in the early 20s, I believe. I
Yeah,
mean, I know Birth of a Nation had done it, but nobody likes Birth of a Nation. So
yeah,
it was really innovative for the time.
yeah. So then we see that Sister Edith is in bed. She's sick, and she's got like the button shirt all the way up to the top, like
Mhm.
modest to the end. Like you can't even let loose in bed, like just be like in your underwear, just like dying. You have to be in those times like just dressed up to the hilt, you know.
Did the actress look like she was having too much fun to you, or was that just me? Like
She was
with
acting with a capital A.
she was with like the broad gestures and everything. I was just like, she is having an amazing time just throwing her arms around and declaring things. And it was just, it looked like she was having a good time as an actress.
Yeah, and for me, like in some silent films, like that's what they do because they're
Yeah.
coming from stage, and for the
Mhm.
stage you have to act for the last or whatever,
Yeah.
and then they don't have the words, they don't have their sound, so they have to kind of gesticulate what they're doing.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can feel a bit too much. For me,
Yeah.
in this movie, it didn't feel too much. How about you? Did you feel like it was too
Well,
much?
I think I only noticed it because she was the only one doing it.
Okay. And was it
Um,
only this scene, or did you see it more?
a little bit later, but mostly
Okay.
in this scene. But I think the fact that Victor and Hilda, who played David and Anna, were so remarkably like subtle
And
for the
subdued.
time. Yeah, that which I hadn't really expected. I had expected more of the
Yeah.
dramatic theater acting. That I was yeah, I found both of their performances, Victor and Hilda's, very haunting.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, because when I'm thinking about it, you're right. Like for the time, for a silent film, it's their performances are subdued, and in comparison to that, Edith's would stand out, especially if she's on her deathbed. You know,
Yeah.
when
And
you
it felt very appropriate for that period of film, but I guess just in comparison, I noticed her more doing that than everybody else who's kind of like a little more restrained.
yeah. And so she's on her deathbed, and she asks Sister Anna,
Maria.
Maria, sorry,
Yeah.
yes, asks Sister Maria to send for David home. And then her mom says, please don't do it. But again, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the names. Edith begs her to do it. This time she obliges.
Yeah.
Off she goes, and she goes to this shed. I'm like, why is she going to this shed? No, this is a house.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy, but it literally looks like the shed where I keep my lawnmower.
Mm,
And there's people sleeping in there, the woman and two children.
mm,
So the woman is Anna Home, which is David Holmes' wife,
mm,
and she's asking about David, but she doesn't know where she is. Meanwhile, they ask a cop for help finding him. So he's asking around at local bars, and finally, Anna is brought back to Edith. Right. Yeah. It's brought
yeah.
back to Edith. Yeah. And the Edith goes and kind of stares at Edith in bed and then leans in and appears to want to, I don't know, like did it look in this scene, it looked like she kind of wanted to strangle her a bit.
Strangle her. Yeah, it looked very much, yeah, like she kind of like had like an animosity inside of her towards Edith, and then Edith kisses her like right on the face, and because it's tuberculosis, I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
But but I thought the wife Anna, I thought she was portrayed by Hilda Borgstrom. I thought she was phenomenal. I like want to watch more of her movies. I just thought she had very captivating expression. She reminded me a little of Betty Davis, and I just wanted to watch her do everything.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Both her and the director, I think they
Yeah.
did an amazing job. I can't imagine like directing and also being so talented like behind or in front of the camera, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So some days I can barely wake up and tie my shoes, but
I
they're
can't,
acting.
yeah, I can't keep plants alive, let alone.
So so far I've noticed two things. One is like interiors and exteriors are different colors. So interiors I noticed were sepia and outdoor shots were blue.
Oh,
And
see,
so,
my version didn't have that.
oh really? So which version did you watch?
Well, so I started out trying to watch one that had like sepia tones and stuff on YouTube, but I couldn't find one with English subtitles.
Okay.
And so I found a version on Internet Archive that had the English title cards, but it was just plain black and white. But that one didn't have sound. So I played the other one in the background at the same time as this one so I could hear the music from the one version and read the other one in English.
That's amazing. That's awesome. You kind of had your own because I mean that's what they had to do in that during the time. They would
Yeah.
have somebody playing the orchestra at the theater.
Yeah, and
That's
whoever did the score I listened to was phenomenal. Like it was really eerie and really good.
yes, especially when we're introduced to the carriage later on.
Mm,
It was great. So so this movie actually takes place on New Year's Eve,
yeah.
which is funny because we are at the time of recording, we're 7 days into the new year. And I now have a favorite New Year's Eve movie. Like we had a little mini movie marathon with some friends, and we are like, "What movie should we watch for New Year's Eve?" And we watched a bunch that were fun, but none of them took place on New Year's Eve. They were just
Mm.
random fun movies. Now I have a go-to movie for New Year's Eve because yeah, this is maybe not the most fun movie to watch,
No, but
but
it's definitely um uh it's probably the best New Year's Eve themed movie I've ever seen.
yeah, I mean, you got this, and you got like When Harry Met Sally or something. I don't know.
Mm,
But so it's New Year's Eve, and there's three dudes who are kind of coded as unhoused, sitting around drinking at a cemetery. And I was just thinking, like, goths have been around forever, right? They're just they didn't even know it. They're pre-goths, like prehistoric goths or something.
yeah.
Because you could literally you if you're unhoused, which they're coded to
Mhm.
be, you could literally drink anywhere. Why are you choosing to be in a cemetery, right? Because you like that goth life.
Yeah, I mean, I saw them drinking and sitting in the cemetery, and I was like, that looks like a good time.
Yeah. So then, so they're sitting around and telling kind of ghost stories, and David tells a story about his friend George, and so this is kind of like our first flashback, I believe, or is our second flash, or is this happening concurrently? Oh, it's happening concurrently with what's happening with
Them
sister.
sitting there is, yeah, and
Yes,
then
yes,
he
yeah, yeah.
tells them the story of this friend he had.
Yes. Okay. So in the flashback, George walks into a room full of dudes who are sleeping. It looks like a barracks or something almost,
Mhm.
right? And he starts doing kind of a stand-up routine with them, right? We don't hear it, but everybody's laughing, everybody's jovial. He's like the life of the party,
Yeah.
and they're eating it up and they all love him. I don't know how I would feel like if it's the middle of the night and I'm sleeping and some dude walks in and just starts cracking jokes. I
Yeah,
don't know if I would love him, but
I couldn't tell like what it was. Like I thought maybe it was like a hospital, and I was just like I don't like I wasn't quite sure what was going on. I assumed they already knew him because he was, just like I don't know, like he seemed very friendly with everyone.
yeah, I think so too. Yeah. And then we kind of flash forward. We see that on New Year's Eve, the once jovial George, he's silent. He's kind of sulking. He's not talking. He's looking off into the distance.
Mm.
He's not drinking and he won't play cards. And then there's like three people playing cards. One of the guys who try to get George to play cards with him comes back to the table, looks at his cards and like accuses another guy of like messing with his cards. And
Yeah.
so they kind of get into a fight. and George breaks it up.
Which is a great fight, by the way. I just for like because I was watching, I guess, the entire movie. I mean, I know it was Swedish and but they did also release it in the US. And so I was just thinking of it in terms of like this is a pre-Hays Code movie and they can do whatever they want.
Yeah,
And so I thought the fight was pretty good.
it's just like tumbling, just grabbing each other's shoulders and falling to the floor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen worse fights, definitely.
Mhm.
But George breaks it up saying, "Don't you know that whoever dies tonight must succeed death's carriage?" And they're kind of like looking around, like, what? So then he tells them the tale. So now it's a flashback within a flashback.
Yeah.
So, um, so we see the Phantom Carriage, and it looks great, and so does Death. And I look here, like the special effects look great as hell. He's like
Mhm.
translucent,
Yeah.
and George says that a single night on Earth is like 100 years for the driver of the carriage.
Yeah.
So I was gonna do math real quick. So is that 365 times 100? I'm not good at math. You want to take a guess? Do you know?
I'm really bad at math. I feel like if it's times 100, it should be just adding zeros, but I can't do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's 36,500 days, which is crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy. For 1 year.
Yeah.
So then the we get kind of like this end of part one.
Mhm.
So this movie is
I
broken
just
up
want
in
to add too that I love the first time like death like we see death arrive and go to collect a soul and he just picks him up right out of his body. I absolutely loved that.
yeah.
Especially for the effects and the time. I was like this is that looks amazing. Like it was such a good way to film it.
Yeah, and like that has, I mean, when I saw that, I'm gonna date myself, and like it's a very specific reference that maybe nobody will get, but I thought of the Crossroads video by Bone Thugs and Harmony when Uncle Charles dies and Death comes down and picks him up and just takes his soul, just like in the movie. I'm like thinking, oh shit. I'm sure that has been referenced down from Phantom Carriage to other movies, and then they got the
Mm,
reference from the other movies. I'm not maybe they got it from Phantom Carriage, but that's the first thing I thought of when I was thinking about that. But you're right, it does look great.
yeah.
And then so this movie is broken up into I think it's like four parts.
Five.
Five
I think it's
parts.
five. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
And I
that
don't
was
know,
the end of part
was
one.
that reels? Like was that just the length of the
Oh,
reels?
possibly. Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't read anything about that.
Oh, because
But
I wasn't sure if yeah if they were structured as like act one, act like two, like as different acts, or if they were based on how long the reels were. But I could be wrong.
that's pretty interesting. Yeah, because this movie for a silent film is pretty long.
But yeah,
Like,
I noticed that too. I was surprised that it was like well over an hour.
yeah, like an hour 40, like an hour 38 or something like that. But
Yeah.
typically a silent film, an hour 11, like around, 80 minutes.
Yeah.
So
I was
this one was
expecting
longer.
80 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be honest, there was a little bit of filler that could have
Mhm.
been cut, but I kind of loved all of it. So
Yeah.
I'm not gonna uh, nitpick. But so um, we get a title card that says wherever he goes, he's greeted with sorrow and despair, and that's talking about death. And we then see the carriage pull up to this mansion, and there's a man inside who pulls a gun from his desk drawer. And then outside, Death starts walking towards the house, and it's translucent, looking great. And then still outside, but within the score of this of the movie, we hear like there's a great musical sting, which indicates that a shot was fired inside the house.
Mm,
I thought that the use of the score was so great, like to use like special effects or sound design for your movie through the soundtrack, and
mm,
you knew exactly what they were doing. Like he basically this dude just committed suicide. I thought it was just used so perfectly.
mm. Yeah. I love that. At the same time, I was wondering like what the original soundtrack like did audiences originally hear when this
Yeah.
was played, and did audiences hear different scores depending on where you were watching it? And so I thought about that a lot, but I really enjoyed this particular score with it. I just thought it just it hit every note so perfectly.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about silent films. Like if you re while I've been researching some of the silent films that we've done for the show, you find out, just like you said, some scores have been lost completely to history,
Mhm.
and some composers had to recreate the scores based on just like two or three notes that they had that were put in the playbill for when the movie was released,
Mhm.
as an advertisement. So the sound, the score had been lost completely, but they took
Mhm.
like these three or four notes from the playbill and they expanded on that for the movie. And just to
Yeah.
do that, and that's just so fascinating to me. But another aspect of silent film that I like is that I've been to two different types of performances for silent films. One was for Haxan. Have you ever seen Haxan?
Mm-mm. No.
It's another Swedish film, and it's basically like it's called Haxan Witchcraft throughout the ages, and it's basically like I think you would absolutely love it. It's
I
so
think
much
I've heard
fun.
of it. Yeah. I think I've heard
Yeah,
of it. I just haven't seen it.
a lot of the devil imagery and the witchcraft imagery, witches riding on brooms, comes from that movie. But I saw it at the Alamo Draft House here in Austin with a live accompaniment by a industrial noise band.
I've
And it
always
was,
wanted to see a silent film with a live accompaniment.
yeah. And then in another time, is it, who was a contemporary to Charlie Chaplin? Like Lloyd?
Buster Keaton?
Uh,
Harry Lloyd?
Harry Lloyd, right? Or something like that. It was one of his movies in Chicago at the Music Box Theater. We had a live accompaniment by a an organ. So the
Mhm.
Music Box Theater is an old movie theater, as old as silent films, right? From the 20s or whatever. And they still have an organ, an original organ there. So they had an organist come and play the organ, the score to the movie that we were watching, which
That's
was
so
like
cool.
it was so much fun. Like it's an experience. Like obviously we've upgraded and like we have sound and all that, but like
Yeah.
it's an experience, and it's a lot of
Hmm.
fun. It's a lot of fun to
Yeah.
see. So back to the movie. Inside the mansion, we see that the man is dead on the floor. He's laying on the ground with the gun next to him. No blood, but you obviously understood what happened. He committed
Hmm.
suicide, and death finds him there, and he picks up his soul and carries him off. So this is what you were referencing earlier,
Yeah.
and it looks great. But the funny part is he goes out, he walks through walls, and
Hmm.
he goes outside and just like hoists him into the back of the carriage. I
Into
thought
the
that's pretty
back.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty funny. So he says there's no escape. Well, not he says, but the card interstitial says there's no
Hmm.
escape. He must perform his forlorn duty.
Yeah.
So then we see like a rocky seashore, and
Hmm.
then we slowly see the carriage come into view, and then Death
Yes.
so fucking good, and Death stops the carriage and then walks down into the ocean floor where we see a body laying, and he again picks up the poor soul's soul and takes that to the carriage. What did you think about this scene?
I thought it was incredible. I think I wrote that specifically where I just wrote down gothic vibes because like just the underwater set like scene was so moody and gothic, and it just it was unexpected. One of the things I noticed a lot throughout this movie was that there were so many different like see like they went above and beyond to like create different environments for the different scenes, and I thought that was really that one was really stuck out.
Yeah, you're right, because this man who's at the bottom of the sea doesn't come into play
No,
later on. They didn't need to show this.
they could have had him wash up on shore, like
Yeah, but they're like, no, let's push the envelope a little bit, and they did.
yeah,
It looks so good.
yeah.
So then back with George, he tells them that the horse and carriage, another reference I'm going to say here is this is for my friend who listens to this show. Horse and carriage, no Cameron. If you don't get it, that's fine. Are always the same, but the driver is not the same.
Hmm.
He says the last soul to die that year, the one who passes over at the stroke of midnight, is destined to be death's driver for the following year.
I think that's an excellent piece of lore, and I can't believe I had never heard that before.
Yeah, I agree, but it's also fucked up because in this movie,
Yeah.
the people who are the last the person to die at midnight are assholes and pieces of shit, right? But what if it was just some random baby or like a kid or just a grandma or something like that that finds himself now death and having to go pick up all
Oh yeah.
these
Oh yeah.
souls.
It's story. Yeah. It's absolutely horrifying. I just mean like as a myth or as like a urban legend. It's very very cool.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah yeah, and especially because you have this charity worker Edith like on death's door and it's almost midnight.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You know what? You're right. I hadn't even were you concerned that possibly she was going to be the one who became death next?
um
Because I don't know if they ever
I didn't think they'd do it just because I didn't think they'd put a woman in that role. But I was like concerned a little bit just like about like the timing. I was like, "Oh, I hope she dies after midnight," which is a weird thing to think while you're while you're watching a movie.
yeah. That is a holy woman, Emily.
I know.
So so that's why George is scared of something happening to him tonight.
David. Oh no, wait. Are
Yeah.
you talking about in the flashback or in the
Yeah. Yeah, we're still
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, right,
yeah.
right. You're right. Hmm.
So because we're at the part where they were fighting over the cards.
Yeah.
So George is still scared of something happening to him tonight.
Hmm.
So now we go back to the first flashback at the
Hmm.
cemetery with David and them, and he says apparently George died on New Year's Eve last year. So that's who Death is from now on, or that's who Death is for the intent of this movie. So back with Edith, she's still asking about David, and the cop finds him. And I just at this point in the movie realized that the person who was telling the story was David, the one that we were looking for.
I didn't realize, yeah, I didn't realize that right away either.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool the way they brought the stories together.
Mm,
And the cop basically like implores him to go with him, but essentially he says no, he's not going to go. Then the other unhoused dudes try to force him to go as well. But
yeah.
again, a fight breaks out. It's like why does everything like end in a fight with you guys?
Because it does. If they made good choices, they wouldn't be hanging out at,
Yeah,
although I mean they might be hanging out at a cemetery at midnight, but
if
like
they were
if they
just goths, they might have just
yeah,
been
if they were just
goths.
goths, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So in the tussle, one of his, I thought, friends hits him in the head with a bottle. And I'm like, how does this make sense? Like your intentions were good at first. You wanted to get him to go see the sister, and then you're like, oh, you're not gonna go see her? All right, fuck you then, and just
it
like smack
escalates
him in the head.
very quickly.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think you can take part of that as, they're all drunk at the time.
yeah,
But also I guess I kind of took it as maybe like David was kind of beating up the other guy a little too much, so it was kind of like uh in like defense of the the other guy who was also attacking David.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But he goes and then David goes down.
Yeah, quickly he gets dropped.
Yeah.
So they like so he gets dropped, and then we're like, oh shit, is he dead? Then they pick him up, and it looks like he's dead. So they fuck the right off. They
They
fuck
run
off right
away.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's the stroke of midnight, and we're like, ah, damn. So the carriage pulls up here, and it for me, and I think you might have been listening to the same soundtrack or the same score. It was the creepiest sound ever for me of just like the grinding of the wheels coming as it drives up, I guess.
Mhm.
What was your experience with the score that you were listening
I
to?
think I think throughout there was like some piano wire sound or something that I kept hearing that I thought was really eerie,
Okay.
but it definitely it made a really uh really big impression when the driver and the carriage comes up, especially because just the silhouette of that carriage and the driver and the horse like throughout is just so ominous. And then when it gets, up close and you're he gets down to go over to David, it's it's really eerie.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was like um one of those sounds that like I'm never gonna forget this sound the rest of my life. But so then the movie I was thinking about, it kind of proceeds a little bit like what's that? Is it Charles Dickens'
I was gonna say it reminds me of A Christmas Carol.
A Christmas Carol, right?
Hmm.
Because like instead of visiting the three ghosts or whatever,
Yeah, but it's like the
past, present,
ghost, the
future.
ghost of an old friend showing him the error of his ways felt very
Yeah,
like the beginning of A Christmas Story.
yeah, or like Scrooged, which is a superior in every way to Christmas. But so then David's soul kind of wakes up and hears the carriage pull up, which was terrifying. He can't even bear to hear the noise anymore, and he covers his ears. Death pulls up and takes off his hood, and we see that it's George, his old friend.
Mhm.
And he steps down with his sickle and approaches, and just the imagery looks amazing here.
Yeah.
And I
I
kind of like, sorry to interrupt. I was just,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I kind of like that they didn't go for like a skull look, like no
Mm,
painting or anything. He just looked like regular George, regular ass George.
yeah. I couldn't tell though. Was there painting on the horse to look like bones, or was that just the lighting in one scene that I imagined?
I've seen that done in other movies. I don't recall it happening in this movie.
Okay, because I saw like a piece of it once, and then they went into a flashback, and I entirely forgot about it and forgot to check again.
Ah, okay.
But I thought like for a second it looked like there were, yeah, like bones painted on the side of the horse. But yeah, I thought the hood and the sickle were very effective. I loved, and I wrote it down somewhere. How every frame and like every frame in the film could have been like a still photograph, and it would have been like gorgeous and fascinating. Everything was framed so beautifully. It was definitely like you could tell that this, came off the age of like photography, and everything, the way they centered um just doors and scenes and people and frames, it just I found it really really engaging to look at, and I could have paused like anywhere and been like, you could hang that on a wall.
Well, I mean, like for the Patreon exclusive, like my background is essentially what you're talking about. It's just a still from the movie, but it's just a random still, but it looks amazing. Like
Yeah.
I would frame that on my wall, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's an excellent point. So David can't believe that it's his friend that's there to, or no, I'm sorry. George can't believe that it's his friend David there to relieve him.
Mm-hmm.
But David says you should take me to the hospital. I'm like, dude, do you see that you are outside of your body right now? Like, what are you
He is
talking
in
about?
denial. He's in denial of a lot of things, and he's in denial throughout the movie about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that, he's immediately like, I need to go to the hospital, and George is like, that's not going to do anything.
So uh, Death George or George Death says that no living soul rides in that carriage. By the time I arrive, it's too late. And
Mhm.
then he says, "You know full well that I am no longer among the living." Because he even said that George died a year earlier. So,
Yeah.
you know, so you're right. He is in denial. So he says, "But you must answer for all the evil you've wrought during your lifetime." I can't imagine the shudder that would go through my body if somebody told, or I guess my soul, if somebody told me that and I could see my body there on the ground and I have to atone for all the evil that I've wrought. You're telling me I've wrought evil in my lifetime? Emily, do you think that you've wrought evil in your lifetime?
I mean, I see. I have extreme anxiety, and I spend a lot of time fixating on tiny little interactions throughout the course of my life that I'm haunted by.
Okay.
So I feel like I would definitely be I would have a very easy time going through my life and pointing out all the things I think I did wrong.
So like you've brought cringe in your lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have.
Yeah,
That's,
definitely. Yeah.
the nature of getting through it all.
Oh yeah. There's not a day that goes by where I'm like, I don't think of some stupid shit that I said like 4 years ago to somebody. I'm like,
Yeah.
why did I say that? Yeah, I get it. Um, so then they're sitting there talking with while David's dead body is right there. And the composition of that shot superior. It looks
Hmm.
amazing. Um, so George said that he knows that it's his fault that David is in this situation
Yeah.
because he fell in with the likes of him. And I feel like David has this, like, people want to make excuses for David a lot throughout this movie.
Yes, throughout the entire movie, to the point where I started getting frustrated with it.
Right. Because he had chance after chance after chance. And like he was a piece of shit to Sister Edith and to his
Yeah.
wife and to his children. And still, we'll get to there, but it's like, come on, like how many chances does a person get? I guess,
Yeah, by the time Sister Edith was giving him extra chances, I was kind of like, you know what? I mean, I don't know if it's worth it.
but it also functions as a morality tale
It
as well
does,
as
yeah.
like a horror movie and a
Yeah.
melodrama and all that sort of stuff. So I understand. There's a lot
Yeah.
of hand wringing.
Yeah.
So then we go a flashback to happier times. David is working in carpentry, it looks like, and he's playing with
Mhm.
his kids at the lake. His wife is cooking, I should say.
Mhm.
Anna, right? Anna's no,
Yeah.
what's her
Anna,
name?
yeah.
Anna's her name.
Mhm. Anna, yeah.
Um, so she's cooking, and it's a very idyllic scene for
Yeah,
sure.
they're like picnicking in a field. It's beautiful.
Yeah, they're frolicking everywhere,
Mhm.
and then we
Yeah,
see,
there's a little baby. There's like an extended shot of the little baby picking flowers, and
yeah.
it's just like the absolute cutest.
And so then we see George and some other dudes drinking merrily. And I believe one of the other dudes might be David's brother, but I wasn't able to figure that one out. But later, David's brother does arrive home drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And then and Anna gets the kids and like basically say, I don't want my kids around a drunk person.
Mm-hmm.
So she grabs the kids to go outside and she walks right into her husband, David, lying drunk in the gutter on the floor.
Yeah,
Not a good look,
yeah.
David.
No, I sympathize with his wife a lot in this movie, and I fully stand by almost every decision she makes.
Well, the cool thing is that she makes the right decisions, right? Like
Yeah.
we see right now that just in a few, we're going to see that she takes the kids and runs because it's
Mm-hmm.
not a safe situation.
Yeah.
And she stays away. And then later on, when what happened and he didn't hold up his end of the bargain,
Mm-hmm.
she's like, "All right, well, I'm taking my kids and running." Like that's
Yeah.
the smart thing, the responsible thing to do when you have children. Like you can no longer be like you have to think about them, not
Yeah.
about
She's like,
yourself.
there is a standard to which you have to hold yourself in order to be around, in order to be, raising these kids together. And if you can't
Yeah.
hold up your end of the deal, then it's not safe.
The bare minimum, our children shouldn't see you lying drunk in a gutter.
Probably not.
Probably not. But probably should be. That's the bare minimum actually, but there's probably steps, levels above that.
Mm.
So later we see David is in jail. He's about to be released. He was in jail for drunken misconduct. But before he's released, there's one more punishment. Like the melodrama here is amazing. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah,
This is like,
that's when like the morality tale really kicks it up a notch is when they're like, we first before you leave, we have to show you something.
yeah. So do you remember do you want to say what happens here?
Yeah, so they bring him, to another cell in the jail, and David's kind of apprehensive. He doesn't know what's going on, and his brother is sitting in this cell, and he finds out that while David was in jail, his brother got drunk and killed a man, and is now facing his life in prison because and it's David's fault because David is the one who led him astray. So
Yeah. And then they say, but you should be the one to serve it in his place since it's your fault that he's here.
I expected I expected them to give him the option, actually. Like I was waiting for them to like say you can go in his place, and then for David to be a shitty person and say no
Which
and
is what
leave.
he did. That's what
Is
he
that what he
did.
did?
Yeah, like
Oh.
he didn't do the time.
No, I thought they just said we think you should be here. I didn't know they were giving him the
Oh,
option to be
I
there.
see what you're saying. Okay, you were saying like more like they were declaring it, whereas I thought that they were giving them the option to do it.
Yeah. Which if
But
they which I like, no, I think your version is more fucked up and therefore more interesting.
yeah, because he just like looks at his brother and like he caresses his face, but
Yeah.
ultimately walks out. And what I
Yeah.
thought was it decided not to accept the responsibility
Yeah.
and just goes back to his cell and starts crying.
Mhm.
The warden asks if this makes him want to change his ways. And he says, yes, I realize what I've done to my family. And he basically promises to turn over a new leaf.
Well, first, he's like, this is, this is the first time there have ever been negative consequences from, people I
Mm.
love have suffered negative consequences for my actions. And the warden's like, well, what about your wife and children?
Yeah. Yeah, he never thinks about them.
No, he doesn't count them as being affected by his actions. And then when the warden says that, he's like, oh, you're right, I should go change my ways, and he runs off to go change his ways
Well, I mean, yeah, but like the cruelty returns like tenfold, I
immediately.
think.
No, that's
Yeah.
that's what made that's what kind of I think um did it for me. I wrote oh yeah, I wrote because he goes back to his wife, and he's ready to change his ways. He wants to be a better husband, and he finds out that she's left him. um and I wrote down, David calling his wife heartless is bullshit, because he immediately gets like angry and is like, well, she's betrayed me.
Yeah. Yeah, that is bullshit.
He's like,
But yeah,
I could understand if he says, I could understand if she had left while I was here, but she left when I wasn't here. And I'm like, yeah, because that's safer for everybody involved.
yeah, because you probably wouldn't have left her leave. As a parent, we see later in the movie that
Mhm.
he would not have let her leave.
Yeah.
So, but one thing I found funny was he goes back to the apartment, it's locked. Then he tries this super secret hiding place of the key under the doormat. And
Yes.
he's able to get inside. He finds it empty, like you said. Some neighbors tell him that she left. And he's like, I thought she'd be so happy to see him. I'm like, really, dude? Really? The last time she saw you, you were like drunk in the gutter. And I don't think who, like the ego of this man.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And
Um,
then and then that's when, from that point on, I started getting more and more, even though I thought it was a compelling story and I thought it was a compelling performance, I became more and more irritated with David as a person.
yeah,
And I was just like, like I wanted to shake him.
slap him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he vows revenge to make her heart as cold as his is now. I
Mhm.
told you he's goth. He's emo or goth right now. So it's like my
Yeah.
black heart, you've turned my heart black. So then back with George and David at the cemetery, George says, death George, right?
Mhm.
Says that David's, um, I don't know what I wrote here, but basically, oh, David's hate grew stronger during his search for his wife.
Mhm.
So that kind of like consumed him.
Yeah.
And but he's like, "Oh, a lot of stuff happened. You know what happened during your life. Let's skip to the important part," which I thought was kind of funny
Yeah.
because they're like, we don't have a lot of time here. We're already at an hour 40. So he's like,
We're already very long for what we're doing. So yeah, let's just move it along.
yeah. So he's like, let's talk about when you came to this town on New Year's Eve. And so we're at this Salvation Army station. It's been set up in town. It's ready for use on New Year's Eve. David tries to enter drunk, and this is when he first meets Sister Edith, who lets him in, whereas Sister Maria
Maria.
did not want to let him in,
Yeah.
but she lets him in, offers him food, but he just wants to sleep. He passes out on the bed, and Sister Edith takes his clothes, and Sister Maria is like, "Don't do that. Don't you know about all the germs? And our laundry machine isn't ready yet."
Yeah.
she's like, no, I'm happy to do so. And she's like praying for him, and she actually is mending his clothes, his jacket.
Mhm.
His suit jacket is all torn up and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Which is horrifying for all of us because we know this movie starts with her dying.
right, right. Or on death's bed.
Yeah,
On
on
death's
in
bed.
her deathbed. In her
On her death.
deathbed. And it but in the beginning it said she'd been like this for she'd held on for a year. So if it's the
Yeah,
previous New Year, you know this is where it started, and you're just like, oh no.
yeah. So then David wakes up and notices his jacket has been mended. And Sister Maria invites him to breakfast. He asks who mended the coat, and she introduces Sister Edith. Or I'm sorry, Sister Edith introduces herself. Then, David like kind of smirks, and then he just like looks at his jacket and just starts ripping it apart and just ripping apart all the work that she did and just
Yeah.
like laughs at her.
What made him change his mind? Because before she comes out, he kind of like, I guess, decides he like, because he seems really moved by the gesture at first.
Yeah.
And then while Maria is getting Edith, he kind of like decides against wanting to like stay and talk to her or whatever, and like gets up to go, and she comes out, and that's when he starts ripping his coat.
Yeah, I think it's just extreme hatred of yourself and
Mm,
like thinking that you're not worthy of somebody being nice to you. And
mm,
then that kind of like reminds you like, oh, you're not worthy and you don't want to feel those feelings anymore. Like every time you look down, you're gonna feel this feeling of unworthiness. And so you're just like,
mm,
well, I'm sorry, I just had a a therapy moment there. But yeah, so that's what I was feeling like that he
mm.
like did that, that was the reason why. But it's just like my mouth dropped. I was like, Jesus Christ, how could you be such a piece of shit to somebody who's been nothing? First of all, a virtual stranger who
Mm,
let you in when you were drunk, fed or offered to feed you. Like I was just aghast.
mm.
So he
Yeah,
says it's a shame you went to all that trouble, but I'm used to having it like this.
yeah,
So I have a little bit here. I want to grant him a little bit of slack. David didn't ask for it to be mended,
that
right?
is true.
And maybe he does have it like that. He has a right to wear the clothes he wants and all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
I think there's a better way to handle it
Oh,
than,
you could definitely nicely say, I do not appreciate this. No, thank you.
yeah, I don't want your pity. I don't want your charity.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe he wasn't religious and he doesn't want any
Mhm.
help from, but you're right. There's better ways to do that. But I wanted to grant him that because, you do have your right to autonomy.
That is true.
So, he tries to leave, but before he leaves, she asks, could you please visit me again next year since I prayed for you to have a good year and I want to see if my prayer was answered? Then he agrees and he says, I'll show you God didn't give a fig for you or your twaddle.
Yeah.
No idea what that means.
I mean, the give a fig for you is kind of like it kind of like you kind of get what it means. I don't know what twaddle means.
Yeah, yeah. But, just old timey lingo.
Yeah.
But again, he was being a dick.
Yeah.
So back with David and George, George
But then at
tells
least
him,
we also find out why she wants to see him on her deathbed, because we don't
yeah,
because I thought maybe I had missed something in the beginning, because I kept wondering, well, why does she want to see this guy? Like, what is this guy to her? And so it makes sense once she knows she's dying, and she wants to see him to find out how his year went and see if her prayer was answered before she dies.
yeah, you're right. It's like seated perfectly.
Mm.
Yeah. So back with David and George, George tells him it's time you honored that promise. And he says his sister Edith awaits him. So the carriage pulls up, but David isn't with the shits. He does not want to go at all.
No.
And then Death says, captive, come forth from thy prison. Basically, George commands him to go. And what a
Yeah.
great line. Captive, come forth from thy prison. Uh,
It's so good, and it comes back around later on, which is
it
which is
does.
fun.
Excellent storytelling, script work, and also I'm sure it's in the book as well.
Mm,
So, so David looks down on his dead body, and George tells him that his spirit has left his body, and basically that he has to do this for a year. He has to be deaf for a year.
mm.
David refuses, and he attacks George. He attacks Death.
Which you have to assume happens often, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
do people willingly accept this? Like, he can't be the first person to be like, no, thank you, I'm good.
Yeah. There's a special kind of somebody. So you know how they say like it takes a certain kind of psychopath to want to be president? Like
Mm-hmm.
it takes a certain kind of psychopath to want to be death. But I'm sure there's people who want to be death, but more often than not, they're like, fuck you, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can imagine. But for George, this would be his first time
Mhm.
getting the fight, right? Because he wasn't. I wonder if George also fought death when he
See,
was.
that's what I was wondering because they seem
Yeah.
to have like, like similar like stubborn streaks and such.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but George obviously overpowers him very quickly because he's deaf, and then he hog ties him and puts him in the carriage. And I was just thinking,
Invisible string, right?
invisible string. I think
When
so. Yeah,
he ties them because he's tying them, but you don't see
you don't see
anything.
anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just thinking how atmospheric this is. Like,
Yeah.
this doesn't feel like a set. It feels like they're outside, just like in a gothic place. And I can't recall like even the shed doesn't feel like a set. It feels like the inside of a shed.
The use of light and shadows are so good in this movie. And
Yes.
I like at one point towards the beginning, I was even thinking like, and it's really impressive because it feels dark and it feels moody and it feels very atmospheric, but you can still see everything, which sometimes today is a little harder to do in darkly lit horror movies. But here, like you can see everything, but it looks very dark
Yeah. It's
or it
about
feels dark.
Yeah, and it's about like what's just off in that shadow in the corner over there. It's not the whole left side of the screen that's a shadow,
Yeah.
but it's great. So this is the end of part three.
Mm-hmm.
So then the carriage arrives at Sister Edith's house, which is the Salvation Army headquarters or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So David is forced to go inside, and they go in. They both go in, but obviously nobody can see them. But then David gets on his knees because he's like seeing Sister Edith. And as he does that, he kind of like approaches Sister Edith's bedside. And Sister Edith sees him and also sees death. And she says, it is death. He has come too soon. And that's when George reveals himself to her. He takes off his hood.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I apologize. I don't think Edith sees
She doesn't see David right
David yet.
away.
Yes,
No,
yes, you're right.
because
Yeah.
he's kind of cowering on the floor because he doesn't want to get involved.
Yes, just yet. You're right. I apologize about that. But she does see death, George, and then this is where Edith asks for a day, since she must talk to David and he hasn't shown up yet. Edith says the man she is waiting for is the man I love. And I said, "What? Excuse me?"
Yeah, I kind of tilted my head and I was like, really? Really?
Yeah, we doing this? I guess
Especially
we
because
are.
at that point in the storytelling, you assume that's the only time they've like ever met is when she sewed his coat and he tore it up. I mean, you then see that they did meet other times, but like up until that point, like when she says it, it kind of sounds like it's coming out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the thing with these movies, like older movies, up until even like the 80s. If they want to inject a love story, they're going to inject a love story. They don't give a fuck about setting it up
That's
or
true.
anything like that. It's just a formula that they need, and they needed a
Mm-hmm.
love story. And it's just like love at first sight. Like
Mm-hmm.
the amount of movies, or that's been a comment. I'm like, you just met, and especially in gothic horror movies. Like there's always a romance angle, like with
Yeah.
Dracula or anything else, or like they see each other and it's love at first sight, and it's like,
You just met and he was awful to you.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I don't know. David is an okay looking dude. I don't think he was anything to be like spooning over, you know?
No, I do think that he had a certain charisma that you could see sometimes, but I don't think it was David's charisma. I think it was the actor director's charisma. I
I
don't
see.
think David was a particularly charismatic person. I just
Yeah,
think that the director had a charismatic face.
gotcha. So then Death George says, I would if I could, but David can't be reached at the moment, basically. And then we then flash back to David in a bar handing out no, I'm sorry. David's in a bar and Edith is in the same bar handing out flyers.
Mm,
And she goes up to his table and she gives him one and he crumples it up like a
yeah.
dick. And the I wonder if it's like the immature thing of like if you like a girl, pull her hair sort of thing, or like just be mean to her. Like this is like prehistoric negging or something, like I don't know, just
Maybe. I
this
mean, it's been around like a long time. Like to
yeah.
I mean, I was talking like uh recently, like I was talking with my boyfriend recently about how, it dating is hard for everyone because the bar is so low. Um like when, you're meeting all these people and it like I mean, yeah, it stems from this. It stems from this thing of, a you know you know boy doesn't have to be nice to you. He can be really mean to you and you can still love him, and that's okay, even though that's not how it's supposed to work.
Which is yeah, it's bullshit, utter
Yeah.
bullshit. And we shouldn't be teaching kids that. I hope that dies with this generation or with this next generation or whatever. But
Yeah.
boys being boys type of shit is not cool. But then we do see here the wife of one of David's drinking buddies
Mhm.
arrives to take him home, but he refuses to go. And she like blames David, and David the whole time is like laughing and like pointing at him, oh, your wife's here, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And then Edith approaches and tries to talk sense into the man, which works. And of course, David laughs at him still. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, let this man be like better himself and go back to his family without you ridiculing him. Like
Right.
you're the loser in this
He's
situation,
making fun of him for like being a good, a good partner, and it's like by like going back and trying to be there for his wife, and it's just, yeah, David is problematic.
yeah. So at this point, I believe it's David's brother. You tell me if I'm wrong, but David's brother is at the table as well, and is
I didn't
kind of.
think it was his brother because I thought his brother was still in prison.
You're absolutely right. You're right. So it's
So
just
I thought this was just another young man David was going to lead astray that Edith
okay.
intervenes for.
Okay. So yeah. So then there's another man there who is smitten by Sister Edith, and she goes up to him and says, "Don't let yourself be dragged under." And he gives him the flyer, or she gives him the flyer, and basically it's like a revival thing. Come to the Salvation Army. They'll have a mass. You can
Yeah,
be saved, sort of thing.
yeah.
What's it called? Born again, sort of like a born again sort of thing.
I guess yeah. I couldn't tell prior to the mass if it was religious, if it was like a temperance thing. I was trying to figure out like European equivalents based on like what things are called, but
Yeah. So later at the Salvation Army, like church party thing, Dave is there, and it looks like a revival, like I said, and it's the man is begging for mercy, the guy who was at his table,
Mhm.
and is begging for mercy, and David again is just laughing at him, thinking he's an idiot. And then after the session, uh, David sees a woman covering her face while she's coughing, and he goes over to her and with derision says like, "Why cover your face? They should all be sick. They should all be as sick as we are. Like basically, fuck them, right?" So she
Yeah.
has consumption, which is it tuberculosis? Is
I
that what it
think
is?
yeah, I think consumption was just like a catch-all for like slowly dying from undeterminable things back in the day. I think often it was tuberculosis.
Okay, so it's she's like coded to have tuberculosis,
Yeah.
and so basically, he's saying just cough so everybody gets it. I was like, wow, this is hitting close to home right now. Like, this,
I was very close to screaming, "You are the problem, David. You are the problem."
Yeah. I was like, man, it's like the last 4 years just like flashed in my mind.
Yeah.
But it's like that's the human condition. It's always that way, man.
Yeah.
There's just so. But Edith says, "Oh, he's just joking. He doesn't mean it." And it's like every girl that's ever fallen for a fuck boy, it's like
Yeah.
again making excuses for him when he's being a shithead.
Yeah.
So David informs Edith, Sister Edith, that he'll be leaving soon, and like the look on her face, like she's like struck in, and she's like basically begs him to stay.
She touches his arm and it's like a moment.
Yeah, yeah. And he kind of looks down at her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she says, "Please stay on account of me making you better," is all. So that's the other thing I was going to say. Maybe it's like a savior complex where she sees this man and she like sees him in the gutter and she's like, I can change him or I can make him better. I can save him. Maybe not so much for her, but she does
Hmm.
say she loves him. But maybe it's the love for him, but also trying to take him, bring him to the Lord in her eyes. Maybe it's something like that because I feel like
Yeah.
Sister Edith, I just don't want her to go out like that,
Well, the savior complex makes much more sense than being this because I wondered that too. Like when she says she loves him, does she mean she's in love with him, or does she mean that she loves all of God's children and wants, everyone to be saved?
Right. Yeah. So that's how I choose to take it. All right. So then right, I lost my place here. Okay. So David insists that he's leaving and he says, I'm on a journey to find my wife. So, unbeknownst to him, his wife was at the ceremony the whole
Mhm.
time. And she goes up to, after David leaves, she goes up and tells Sister Edith that she is who David is looking for.
Mhm.
I'm his wife, she says. And she says, I took the kids and ran. Then I don't know if you noticed this, but Sister Edith has a hat on it that says slum.
Yeah, I noticed the hat. I didn't notice what it said.
I wanted to look it up, but I forgot what slum means in Swedish
Mhm.
because I know at the end of the movie,
Oh yeah, it
I
says
always love to see
yeah,
it. Yeah, did you want to
yeah.
say?
Oh yeah, it says slut at the end,
Yeah,
right?
which yes,
Yeah,
which in Swedish means
end.
the end.
But
Yeah.
it's very striking when you just see it pop up and you're like, oh,
You're like, excuse me, you don't even know me.
right?
Which is funny because I was talking to my wife about this maybe like a week or two ago in preparation for this show. I was like, oh, I can't wait to see the Phantom Carriage. It's a Swedish film. I know at the end it's going to say slut. She's like, excuse me. So I always love seeing it. But slum on the shirt on the hat, I don't know what it means. But so Sister Edith has this look like for me, I was taken as like I can change him, and this is the lighting. It was like sorry. It was like a profile shot of her. She was in the middle and there was like wood paneling behind her and there was a really harsh or a strong light in front of her, so she was casting a shadow and I don't know what the composition of the shot, the way she was acting, like the subtlety that her face makes, it was just great for me here. And so I
Mm-hmm.
kind of got like, for me, she was like deciding whether or not to continue to trying to help this man.
Mm-hmm.
And like she's like, I can change him. And so so she's having these machinations in her mind about how she's going to
Well,
save him.
well, he doesn't say why he's looking for his wife. He just
Right.
says that he's looking. So like he doesn't say he's looking for her for vengeance. He just says he's looking for her. So when Sister Edith sees that, she's there, she's like, oh, I can bring them together.
That is true. That's a good point. That's a good point. But she tries to convince Anna to take David back. Um, so this is at this point, I was like, this is very melodramatic. This is like
Yeah.
stories, this is like my stories. I'm loving it. And then again, this is where I was like, oh, they're doing the very non-linear storytelling again, which was
Mhm.
coming out great. So over some days, she kept working on David's wife to take him back, even like talking to the kids about it. So then on the day, they have a policeman escort David, who's dressed in his Sunday best. He's freshly shorn to see his wife. And I was thinking, oh, can they reconcile? And so the scene ends, and that's the end of part four. So we're getting here towards the end of the movie. So I think this is where we get a title card. It says basically she hoped to replant in good soil the seed that had fallen among the thorns.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So basically tells us what she's trying to do. She's trying to get David back in with his family so
Yeah.
that he could turn toward the Lord, basically. So it says it may have worked had it not been for, and then dot dot dot. And then I gotta remember what that dot 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 well, like if it had not
I
been
think
for what?
I think it would have been if not for because then it cuts to Edith on her deathbed again, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
assumed if she hadn't taken a turn and become so poorly as to not like, like she was no longer like there to kind of shepherd them because she was
Oh,
so ill that she, couldn't do that's why it wasn't she was blaming herself basically because
yeah.
no one ever blames David.
David's not gonna take responsibility for it.
No.
So and nobody's gonna grant or put that responsibility on him.
Yeah.
So the sister Edith is sick. She's been sick for a while, and they say it's because she's been worrying about David, but really we know it's the consumption that she got from him, possibly more than likely got from him when she first met him.
Hmm.
Later, we see that David comes home drunk, and he's trying to break the door down, but Anna lets him in,
Hmm.
and he starts messing with the kids while he's drunk, like flicking. I think it was the little girl's head, like flicking
Yeah.
her in the head and then coughing in their faces. And I was like, Jesus Christ, dude, like you have possibly tuberculosis. And she's like,
Yeah.
At the very least, could you not try to get them sick? And
Yeah.
like, that's the lowest fucking bar like
It really
ever
is.
set, you know?
It's like, can you not actively try to, make them, you know, unwell? Like yeah, it's the least he could do, and he's just not caring.
Yeah. And then he wipes his mouth and throws the rag at her.
Yeah, which I've severe OCD, and a lot of that's around contamination and germs and stuff. And so I watched that, and I was just like, oh, like I had like a full body reaction to
Yeah.
it.
Just break out in hives. Ugh.
Yeah. Ugh.
Um, so I'm an atheist, former Catholic, and as you can tell by my religious trauma, I'm still working out of with this my horror confessional. But but this is what angers me so much because you still see this to this day in the church. They will, they're very against divorce,
Mhm.
and so they will force people together who should not be together for one reason or the other. This time, it's not on Anna. Or Anna, she's like a great mother.
Mhm.
It's on David, but they force them together and they put women in the situation in which they're going to have like domestic violence put against them
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
then possibly even being murdered, by their spouse, all
Yeah.
in the name of religion. And this just pisses me the fuck off. Like I understand what Edith was going for, but like honestly, maybe she didn't have the whole story, but like you have put Anna and her kids in danger now,
Yeah.
right? Because at the very least, because he's coughing on them with tuberculosis,
Yeah.
but also physical danger, right?
Yeah.
As we see in
Yeah.
this scene.
I watch a lot of true and listen to a lot of true crime, and the number of stories that like where the person's reasoning was, well, I couldn't get divorced, so murder was an option,
Yeah,
is just it's a terrifying pipeline.
yeah. Just get the divorce. Just get the
Yeah.
divorce, guys. But so he goes in the kitchen and his wife locks him in there and she gets the kids together and she's trying to leave. And David doesn't realize it until a little bit later.
Mhm.
And then he goes to open the door, which is so weird. That's like old style houses where every room had a door with a
Had
lock.
where you could lock it from the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. But I've seen that like in the house I grew up in Chicago, it was an older house and they had remnants of that by the time we moved in there in the 80s.
Mm.
They had removed the doors, but the door frame was still there and all that sort of stuff. Or like some had just been painted over and not used as a doorway anymore, sort of thing.
And
But yeah, it's an
I
old
think that was
style.
that was a popular narrative device also, like in like in like period pieces and stuff. You see like someone locks someone else in a room, like they just go over and turn the key and they're locked in, and like you see that all the time in like period dramas.
Yeah, yeah, which you said you started off reading, right?
Yeah.
Or
Mm-hmm.
writing, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
So then he goes to go out of the kitchen, realizes he's locked in and demands to be let out, but Anna's not letting him out. So what does he do? He goes and grabs an axe and starts breaking the door down with it. At first he goes for the doorknob. Then when that doesn't work, he starts breaking it down just in the middle of the panel. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, holy shit, The Shining, right?
I wrote a note down calling it the Jack Torrance moment, because he was, yeah, he starts on the handle and I'm like, he's gonna go for the center, isn't he? He's gonna go for the center of the door. And then when he starts going for the center of the door, I was like, The Shining.
Yeah, it was so great. I mean, on the Patreon, it's the screenshot behind me. But yeah, so the Here's Johnny scene in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining was a tribute to the scene, but ironically, the scene in this movie was a tribute to D.W. Griffith's movie, or a scene in D.W. Griffith's movie called Broken Blossoms, where a similar scene occurs. So like everybody's copying everybody. That's
Mm,
it's fine, you know. You're paying homage, right?
mm,
But this felt so like terrifying to me, like the way that they were acting it, like you could see murder in David's eyes,
mm.
and you could see like the fright in Anna's eyes.
Yeah.
And I have a family member who goes by Anna, and
Mm.
so it's difficult for me to remember Anna, so I'm going Anna all the time
Yeah.
here. But uh but yeah, like I just thought it was so well acted, and it's kind of scary and terrifying at the same time. What did you think of this?
Yeah, it's a very tense moment. I was surprised, and maybe because I did so much like cinema study stuff, I was struck by the quality of the door, because he really has to hit it like a number of times. Like it's not a flimsy door at all. Like he
Yeah.
really has to hit it to get through. But it's so, yeah, it's frightening, because you want, she's dressing the children to, take them out of the house, and you just want, her to dress them faster, and you're waiting for her to get out before he gets out, and then she faints.
Yeah, which I didn't like. I kind of, I mean, I understand this is 1921,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm really tired of that trope. You know, like
Yeah.
the woman, the gentle woman who can't like take a lot of stress and just faints or
Oh,
something like
see,
that.
I saw I didn't assume, maybe just because like I said, I loved her performance so much. I think I'm just giving her all these benefits of the doubt. I thought maybe it was like because they didn't have any food or something, like because like
Mm.
malnutrition, just maybe like all the activity from not eating is was just too much. And also just I I kind of thought it was maybe like once it happened, it seemed like the safest thing, because you wonder if he would have killed her if she had not fainted.
Yeah, right. Because he would have like
Because,
maybe chased her out
yeah,
or
because
something.
when she faints is when he gets her a glass of water.
Yeah, he kind of like all of his anger kind of leaves immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if they were still using fainting couches back then in the 20s, you know, with is it a bustier or what is it?
I don't know.
A
Fainting catches
waist
were
trainer.
definitely a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, hopefully that's it. Because I know like in movies, especially horror movies, a lot of times like
Oh
women
yeah.
will just faint
Oh yeah, it
because
just became too much for her and she was overwhelmed. Yeah.
yeah. But so that she faints, he finally gets out of the room and he sees her on the floor, drops the axe, goes gets her some water. And it's kind of like the only tender moment, except the very end, but the only
Mhm.
kind of tender moment between the two of them,
Yeah.
which was nice to see that there was at the very least some love still there.
Yeah. But then when she wakes up, I think he goes right back to being mean to her. Like
Well,
she says something, and like, haven't you punished us enough or something, and he.
yeah, she says, "Haven't you had your fill of revenge, David?"
Mhm.
Great line,
Yeah.
amazing line. So Sister Edith, so back with Sister Edith, we see that she tells Death that if she hadn't brought them together again, then none of that would have happened. So, like you said, she's blaming herself.
Mhm.
So she begs for one more day. And then David looks on unable to do anything, but he's kneeling at her bedside and he's hearing her, and she says that she's always loved him. So again, we kind of don't know if it's
Yeah.
romantic love or more like love for another human being that she wants to bring back to the Lord, you know.
Yeah, I want it to be that, because at least if it's religious fervor, it's more, I don't know, it's not perpetuating the whole let's adore this man who's being mean to me.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That's what I'm hoping for as well.
Yeah.
But finally, she's able to see him, and it says one of the lines on the title card says, "Captive, ye of loving heart, come forth from thy prison." I thought, what a beautiful line. Like, and then I was like,
Yeah.
okay, so this, I mean, at the time before you and I talked, I
Mhm.
said, well, this is a love story. It feels like at this point that they're trying to push it that way, but I'm hoping it's the other thing.
Oh, see, I thought he said that to her because she was just such a kind-hearted person. Because that's when she then passes out, right?
Yeah, then she passes. That's
Yeah.
when she passes. Okay,
So
so
so I
her
thought maybe he was,
prison.
yeah, he was telling her to leave her prison, but she was a good-hearted person, so he said it kindly.
Okay, love it. That's why I love having these conversations. So then, so she passes, and then Death George says it's time to go, and they walk through what I'm trying to remember. Does he get her soul at this point? No, right? He doesn't get her soul.
He says those that are coming to collect her will be here soon, and then I
Yeah,
wonder about who's coming to collect her.
yeah. Does death take people to hell, and then others take people to heaven? Is that what she's?
Maybe.
Is that what
Maybe
they're trying to simulate?
I saw it as foreshadowing, like, because that makes more sense. I saw it as like foreshadowing that George wasn't going to make David go through with this. So like
Hmm.
it's not our responsibility to be here right now. It's going to be somebody else's and they leave.
Okay. All right. Um, I kind of like that some of the stuff is left up to
Hmm.
your own
Yeah. And
what
then you
you think.
wonder and then you wonder if it was that vague in the book, or if it was more thoroughly explained in the book and just in the film they cut it for time.
Right. Yeah, I'd be interested in reading the book as well. I have to look it up.
Hmm.
Hopefully there's got to be English translations of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we're back. We get a New Year's greeting from Death. So they're in the carriage, and
Hmm.
he's basically saying he wants to give this New Year's greeting. It's a New Year's prayer. He says, "Lord, let my soul come to maturity before it is reaped."
That was the moment I knew that he was gonna let David go.
Did you? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Hmm.
I
That was the moment I heard that, and I was like, he is gonna let him off the hook.
I just thought it was some sick shit he wanted to say, like, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," sort of thing.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was like, he wants David to go back and do it better. That's what he
Okay.
wants.
So later they arrive at Anna's shack, and she says, "No, I can't go on."
Hmm.
And she looks at the sleeping children. She says she must go and she can't leave them behind. When
It's
she
it's a
said
really
that,
dark moment. It's really dark.
I was like, "Holy shit!" Like, I love dark movies and I love when they
Hmm.
go for it. I don't
Yeah.
think I was prepared for it in this movie.
No.
I think I would have like run out and got a Phantom Carriage tattoo if like they went there, but I don't think it was probably too dark.
I,
But
I I was like, the Hayes Code would not have allowed this.
so but says she can't leave him behind. She begs for forgiveness, and then she says, "This will do, David. It will suffice for the children and myself." And
Mhm.
she has this powder
Mhm.
that she's putting into liquid, and we never
That
find
she's
out what the
apparently
powder
has on
is.
her at all times, because she like takes it out of her clothing. So she has this on her at all times.
Yeah. And we never find out what it is, but maybe it's like some sort of rat poison or
Yeah.
anthrax. Apparently, anthrax was easier to get around then. If you listen to true crime, like you hear all the time, but like people being murdered by
Yeah, they had
anthrax
like a
or
lot of like arsenic and stuff.
arsenic as well. Yeah. So David is seeing this and he implores Death to do something. And he says he will. He will watch, which is his duty.
Mhm.
and she pours the powder into the drink. And David again begs him to stop it, but Death says he has no power over the living. So this reminded me of this movie that I saw a year or two ago that I absolutely fell in love with, called Macario. Have you ever heard of Macario? It was from
Mm-mm.
the 1960s. It's from Mexico. And it might have been actually from 1960. And it was Mexico's first submission to the Academy Awards. And it would have won except for Ingrid Bergman or Ingmar Bergman, I should say. One of the movies that he released actually won. So Ingmar Bergman is all over this history. But Macario is about this poor peasant who comes across the devil, and the devil gives him a choice, and then he meets death as well, and death gives him the ability to see when people are going to die, and then he uses that to his ability to be like to charge people on whether or not this person is going to live or not. Death also gives him this liquid that if you take a little sip from it, you recover. And so he becomes this sort of doctor, and people start coming to him around the way. But in the end, something happens that reminds me of this, and it is incredibly powerful. It's a great movie. If you guys haven't seen it, uh, Macario. In fact, I do a recommendation at the end of the movie,
Mm-mm.
and that's gonna be my recommendation. But yeah, it's an extremely powerful movie. But it reminded me of that. But then so David again, he's still begging, but he says, "Who can I pay? Who can I pray to? I should say, who can I pray to?" He begs, and he begs to the Lord for mercy. And for me here, the score was absolutely amazing. It was so suspenseful.
Mm.
And George says, "I see I no longer need to grieve for you. Captive, return to thy prison."
And it's such a great line. It is so good. Like it is so good coming all the way back around to that.
Yeah, because that's what he said in the
When he pulls
beginning.
him out, yeah, he
Yeah.
says, captive, come from thy prison or whatever. And then when he sends him back.
Yeah. So I was like, wait, what's happening here? So then we go back to David, and we're back at the cemetery where he had been knocked out. He returns to his body and he wakes up. So for me, did it all happen, or was it a dream to you? What do you think happened?
I think it happened because how else would he have known that his wife was up making tea with poison in it at that time, if not for I mean, unless she was just up because for whatever reason, and he ran home and just assumed that's what had been happening.
Yeah, then yeah, but then who becomes death? Was it Sister Edith because she died
Well, she died though after midnight.
after midnight?
So then my assumption was it just reverted to some poor soul who died near to David and becomes like that person's responsibility.
Like,
Unless unless
damn.
unless George was taking this on and doing it an extra year for David.
That's an awful lot to assume.
I
I
don't
would think
know.
we're like yeah.
It's very open ended as to whether or not it happened.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. But like what you said about it being like the second person, that sucks because like what if you're already in heaven or whatever, you're just
Yeah.
hanging out because it's been like in a couple hours, and then they're like, actually, we're gonna need you to go back and be death for
Your your
360,000
soul is already
days.
saved, and we think that we can save this guy's soul if we let him live. So we're gonna let him live, and you can go do Death's job. Congratulations.
Yeah, so now does death have the ability? I thought death doesn't have the ability to intercede in human lives,
Mm.
but he did here because he let him live.
Well,
So
he wasn't interceding with a human. He was interceding with the dead because he was already dead at that
okay,
point.
okay, that's a roundabout way, but it brings him back to being alive, which
Yeah.
interceded. But yeah, I see it. So then he's astonished to still be alive. David runs to his wife, thinking that he still has time to interrupt her before she, you
Mhm.
know, family annihilator,
Hmm.
her kids. So
Yeah.
she locks the door, but he gets in. He like
Hmm.
breaks in, and he looks at the children. He made it in time, and he's so grateful. And he goes to his children, and he's weeping. And to
Hmm.
be 100% honest with you here, I was like swept up in this moment. Just the emotion that was going on here. Like I was crying here. This was so emotional to me. It was so moving. Like it was amazing.
I really loved that moment. And I like as I was watching it, I was like, yes, we should see men cry more often, like in these types of movies. Like it was very humanizing, and it's something that I don't know if you see a lot of um in like older movies where men are supposed to be very like stoic and whatnot. And it just to see him sitting there crying was very moving.
Yeah, I mean, Anna herself was moved by
Hmm.
him crying, but before that he says that Sister Edith is dead. He knows because he was at her side, and
Hmm.
he promised her that he'd be a good husband and a father.
Hmm.
And Anna says, "You're lying." Like she yells at him. And I'm
Yeah.
like, who can blame her? Like at this
Yeah.
point, we've seen her like forgive him multiple times, but they've been married and in a relationship for a long time. He
Yeah.
was a drunk for a lot longer than we saw. So she's
Yeah.
probably forgiven him so many times. Like I don't blame her for being angry, right
Yeah.
now, you know?
Hmm.
And but David breaks down, and she asks if he's crying, so that moves her. But apparently,
Hmm.
she, like you said, she's never seen him cry. And
Hmm.
then he says she didn't believe him, but now that he's crying, she believes him. And then he says, "No one believes that I want to reform." And I was like, "Okay, David, like actions speak louder than words, right? Like you're being
Yeah.
a bit manipulative
Well,
here."
he has a lot of self-pity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
He has a lot of self-pity and not a lot of empathy for others until yeah, his family's life is literally on the line, and then suddenly he gets swept up in wanting to be there for them.
and to be clear, he hasn't apologized for anything yet.
No.
He's just broken into the room and like cried. And the act of crying, she's like, whoa, he's really serious this time.
Because the bar is so
Yeah,
low.
because
You're
the
like,
bar is
"Oh,
so low.
look, he's showing emotions and they're not just yelling."
Yeah.
Groundbreaking.
David is a piece of shit.
He is. He is, which I think is also though a testament to the film, because it's it's a really compelling, fascinating movie in spite of him being a piece of shit. And like that didn't take away my enjoying of the movie. It just made me dislike him.
Yeah, exactly. And like to prove more of a point, like Sister Edith needed to die so that you would come around and be a man and like, that just be responsible for your family and your wife and like love
Yeah.
them and let them love you. She needed to die because of that. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. But then they look up at each other, and she says, what does Anna say? I won't be truly happy until all my sorrow is drained. So David caresses his wife, and he says, Lord, may my soul come to maturity before it is reaped. And
Which is what George wanted someone to say, right?
yeah, exactly. And then slut at the
And
end
then
of it, which
slut
is
comes up at the end. Yeah.
the end. And so that's the Phantom Carriage from 1921. So what did you think? So we're going to go into ratings in a second
Hmm.
here, but overall, what did you think of the Phantom Carriage?
Um, I thought that it was I thought that it was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeously shot, beautifully acted, and for a and like pretty interesting for like a heavy morality tale.
Yeah, and light on the horror, but it's still
Mhm.
there.
No, but it,
Um,
it did have like gothic vibes throughout, I thought.
yeah, and like just I wanted to cover the Phantom Carriage. It's horror. Shut up. No, but like this very minimal horror, but it's still there. But you have to understand, like horror started somewhere, right? These are like the
Yeah.
seeds of what we're
Hmm.
seeing now, and like
Yeah.
so you're not going to see dead bodies and blood and all that sort of stuff, but it's still there, and there's just suspense and
Yeah,
atmosphere and all that sort of stuff.
and the Shining, which drew inspiration, is clearly horror.
Yeah,
So it kind of like evolved in waves.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I absolutely love this. Like we talked so much about it, like the acting, the direction, the cinematography, the set design, like like you may pointed out the lighting,
Yeah, the
like
filmmaking went above and beyond what it needed to do in 1921.
yeah, yeah. So I absolutely love this film. So let's go ahead and let's get into rating. So what we do is we rate these out of five upside down crosses.
Mm-hmm.
So which is very on brand for this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? I'll say that one thing. Like it doesn't hit you over the head with the religion
Mm-mm.
or the with the like the Jesus aspect of it. It's mentioned a little bit. She's a sister, but it's not like beating your head over beating you over the head with it, which I appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another point in its favor. But out of five upside down crosses, what would you give the Phantom Carriage?
Um, I'd probably give it a 4, I would say.
Okay.
I am subtracting because of that potentially weird love story that they tried to squeeze in there that I thought was unnecessary and problematic. Um, but as a film as a whole, I thought it was really solid, and I'd say 4.
Yeah. So for me, I went into do you do Letterboxd?
No.
Okay. Uh for me, I went in my letterbox and immediately gave it 5 stars. Like the credits were still coming up or like slut was still on the screen. I gave it 5 stars. And then but talking with you about it, there's some things that some inconsistencies or
Mm-hmm.
some stuff like problematic, the relationship, the kind of love at first sight sort of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
wasn't my favorite. So I think I did have to give it take some upside down crosses away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna give it 4.5 upside down crosses. But regardless, I still absolutely love this film.
Mm-hmm.
It's a treat to see a movie that's 103 years old at this point because
Yeah.
it came out New Year's Eve 1921 or New
Mm-hmm.
Year's Day I should say 1921. So it's 103 years old. Like it's amazing to
Yeah.
think that they're making movies like this 103 years ago. It's absolutely incredible. So
Yeah.
so the last thing we do here, Emily, is I ask for a movie in a similar vein to this. It could be another silent horror film. It could be another movie about death. It could be another movie about a carriage if you really love carriages. It could be anything in it. So I'll go first to give you a chance, and if we need to pause it or whatever, that's fine as well. But for me, I'm going to say Macario, which I already talked about. It is from 1960 and directed by Roberto Gavaldon. And I'll just give you a quick summary of it. It's a supernatural drama film directed. It's based on a novel of the same name, loosely based on an old border legend. So, um, yeah, it's about a poor indigenous woodcutter who is trying to feed his family, comes across the devil and death, and they kind of do a wager. And it's a lot of fun. But it's also kind of like this movie where it's not a lot of horror, but there are horror elements there. And the imagery of it is absolutely stunning. There's one shot in it that I have been thinking about since I watched it, and it's just gorgeous. So, Macario from 1960, I would highly recommend anybody to watch it. So, for you, Emily, do you have an idea of a movie that you'd recommend?
I'm gonna recommend another movie from the 1920s.
Okay,
Because I recommend this absolutely any chance I get. It's Mystery of the Wax Museum. And it's
nice.
late 1920s. It stars, I believe, Glenda Farrell and Faye Ray is in it,
Oh, nice.
which is always a delight. And it's one of my favorite movies. It's I think it's colorized. Like I don't like because it was in the age of black and white, but like the version you watch is in color. So I think they maybe painted it. I don't
Okay.
know, but it is fascinating to watch and it is so good. And I know there have been a lot of wax museum incarnations since then, including the popular Vincent Price one. And I love Vincent Price. This movie is better.
Okay.
And it's about a there's this guy who makes these gorgeous wax statues and his studio is burned down for the insurance money by this money by the guy who's funding him, and then you move to another city at another time, and like there have been some murders and stuff. And there's this woman reporter who's like following the case, and it's such an incredible pre-code movie, and I love it so much.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check it out because I haven't seen that one. So Mystery of the Wax Museum.
Mhm.
So everybody, Emily and I are going to continue our conversation in the Sunday School Sessions, which is a Patreon exclusive show. If you want to support the show again, patreon.com/my horror confessional. Emily, I wanted to thank you so much for being on the show and talking about this with me. Thank you so much for picking the Phantom Carriage. If you could please let everybody know once again about your book, when it's coming out, and how they could support you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. My book, Midnight on Beacon Street, is coming out January 30th, and it's available wherever books are sold. And you can follow me online at most of the social medias, Emily R. Verona, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky. And my website is emilyruthverona.com. Yeah, so if you want to check any of that out. But yeah, this is great. I had such a wonderful time. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to have you back on. I will definitely be linking your socials in the show notes. So anybody wants to look for that, definitely support Emily and her book. The book sounds absolutely amazing. And thank you everybody for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Live spooky, die spooky.